Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm here with Jeremy.
Hello everyone.
And today, as discussed, we'll take out a bit of your time to discuss the main conclusions of our latest report on the state of the global agri-food tech ecosystem, notably focused on investments, and discuss also the trends, what we are seeing, and where things might go in the coming quarters. And notably, we'll show our latest data covering Q3 25. This will take about 30 minutes, and we'll have 15 minutes or so to take your questions. If you have any questions, you can ask them through the Q&A tool, which you should have in your toolbar in Zoom. So everything should be working there. So if that's okay for you, now we'll just being able to start. So to give you a bit of intro about who we are and what we do at DigitalFoodlab, we've been working together with Jeremy for the past 16 years now, quite a long time now. So initially as entrepreneurs, we created a food tech startup here in France that we developed, maybe quite in advance to the ecosystem. We sold it to a health company, so already connected, connecting food and health, and then created DigitalFoodlab, which we've been working on for the past 7 years. In a nutshell, DigitalFoodlab is a consultancy specialized in food tech or agri-food tech. We work mostly with large agri-food companies, such as the global companies that you have on the screen, on two streams. One, which is exploration. So what should you look at? What is happening on specific ecosystems, either on an ad hoc type of missions through reports or ongoing way subscription-based watch. And the other stream is about strategy. So once you know what is interesting and relevant, what should you do about this kind of information, how to leverage innovation, with whom, how much does it cost, where to do it, and how to integrate it to your portfolio. As I said, we specialize in agri-food tech. We look at the whole value chain from animal feed to things connecting health to supplements, and also with a global approach. So always interesting to know what's happening here or there, but it's much better to compare it with a global outreach. And finally, trying to connect what's happening inside the innovation ecosystem to what's coming upstream somehow from research, and also downstream with a relationship to the large scale incumbent players. But now, just a few words of definition about what will be talking about for those of you that are new about these topics. When we talk about food tech, before jumping directly to the investment ecosystem, we're talking about the ecosystem of players or innovative players, mostly new companies, which are developing solutions around the agri-food supply chain. So around these six topics: agtech related to agriculture, food science, new food products, which can be new brands or leveraging new types of technologies, food service related to restaurants, supply chain, logistics, and packaging, delivery startups, and also consumer tech. So things that are around personalization, new appliances, things like that. The reason that we're talking about this ecosystem is that the agri-food supply chain is in dire need of a reinvention, somehow of a revolution, at least due to four factors. First, climate change. Food is responsible of about 4 to 30% of the global emissions, but also global emissions and climate warming has an impact on yields and will have an increasing impact on our food system. The other quite obvious megatrend is aging. So notably in the West, our population are aging quite fast, and so they need also different kind of products, but also food companies need different kind of growth models. Health-related topics. Obviously, nowadays, these are topics that we hear a lot about, and notably around GLP-1 and other topics. And finally, value distribution. The way value was distributed in the supply chain is changing fast, and that's these four factors are creating what we call the perfect storm, a need for change, but change is not coming, or at least not that much from large legacy players. It's mostly coming from new players such as startups, but these startups don't have the potential to scale their innovation in many cases. That's why we often say that food tech, agri-food tech is the future of food, but it will be created by these startups, but it will be leveraged and scaled by large agri-food companies. And that's why it has never been so important to look at what's happening. But if we say that food tech is the future of food, it's definitely a future that doesn't look great right now. As you can see on screen, these are just snapshots of recent piece of news about startups that are just going bankrupt all over the world. And that's what we'll address right now. So many of these companies went down for in many ways similar patterns. So they raised too much money too fast on technologies and or business models that were unproven. So where does that leave us, and where does that leave us now? Where are we? If we look at the state of the innovation ecosystem, here on the screen you have the latest data that we've gathered at DigitalFoodlab. So this is based on our proprietary database and other databases that we're using, and also matched with our different categories. So as you can see, three different cycles in the agri-food story. Slow rise since inception 2012, 2014. Explosion during COVID, where everything tech was going crazy, huge investments, and then since then decrease. We had a small bounce back in 2024. It was hoped that things were going better, but actually, as you can see on the right, we have a new decrease in funding in 2025. And even if we look at data in terms of quarter, we have just ended Q3, and from our projection, it would be the worst quarter that we've registered for quite a long time. So, put simply, we've went back to a situation of 2015 if we take into account inflation. So almost a decade has been wiped out of progress in this ecosystem. We'll look at the state of funding right now, so where funding remains, and we'll try to find some explanations of why funding has decreased, and also some indications of where we could go further. So if we try to look at where funding is still happening, first let's have a look at the same graph, but with the categories. As you can see on the screen, delivery was the most important category for quite a long time. Now it has become a minor one, and also investments are not so much been affected in, at least in the beginning, 22 and 23, in agtech and food science categories. They've increased quite significantly last year, but at least for the first half of 2025, the decrease is almost everywhere. And if we look at the three most important categories, agriculture, delivery, and food science, we have somehow similar patterns. In agriculture, at least the investment ecosystem is still strong. So we had a good year last year. As you can see on screen, the decrease is much less visible compared to the peak in 2021. We just went back 6 or 7 years, not 10 years, so that's not so bad. And also this ecosystem has totally changed. Vertical and urban farming has disappeared. Instead farming, which we often, notably in Europe, tend to see as something which is dead, is not, and far from it being dead. We still see a lot of funding for new facilities, new factories, so still a very lively space. Farm robotics is a highlight. It's one of the few agri-food spaces where there are exits, which is one of the things that which is lacking in the space. And finally, sustainability topics around methane emissions, bioinputs, that remains one of the main funding target topic for the ecosystem. So at the end of the year, we'll land in something around 3 billion. It's a decrease, but maybe not that bad compared to the other spaces. If we look at delivery startups, so we are, as said on the slide, clearly past the peak in terms of funding, but not yet at the full potential in terms of revenues. Finally, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had startups, and most of them turning to sustainable growth models with very significant revenues in the hundreds or billions in terms of gross revenue, which is very interesting. And finally, profits. So that's something very interesting. So we went from funding non-profitable models to now much less need for funding and still a lot of activity happening. So, and also we tend to have a focus which is a bit more on the Western countries, but we should also in this category have a focus about what's happening in developed economies, especially Middle East and India, where we see a lot of activity and maybe things that should inspire the future of delivery and retail. Third category, which is food science. So as I said in the beginning, it's both new food products, so marginal innovation in terms of technology, but innovation in terms of market trends and consumer demand, and also innovation in terms of technology concerning things like alternative proteins, healthy aging, etc. So here, what you can say, funding again is not doing so bad. Last year was even in some ways a good year, notably for brands. This year should be also not so bad year, but it's mostly driven by brands. It's not the alternative protein which is doing well. It's mostly brands because it's again the highlight of the whole agri-food tech ecosystem. That's the space where we see exits. So it creates liquidity and then it creates a will to reinvest into the space. And also the other highlight is obviously everything related to healthy aging and players which are moving in some ways to cosmetics and the what we call the food cross biotech ecosystem. So that was where funding were happening in terms of categories. If we extend that to geography, we have the clear map of what's happening on a global landscape, notably for 2024 plus the first half of 25. In a nutshell, still a lot of funding in the US, quite logically, but actually quite reinforced also. So because most of the exits are happening in the US. So at the end of the day, investors, and notably US investors, which were starting to invest in food tech in Europe and in other continents, are retracting back to the US, which is positive for the North American market, not so much for the European Asian ones. So that means much less funding in Europe, notably a strong decline after 4 very good years. And also in Asia, a slight decrease, but still an interest that grows in relevance. If you look at two ecosystem in specifically, one which I find increasingly interesting, which is the Chinese ecosystem, because the metrics that we use normally to get to determine if an ecosystem is relevant are not working for China. If you look at this data, basically we say, okay, yeah, nothing is happening anymore in China, so we shouldn't care because 200 million invested in the first half of 25 is not a lot of money. But actually, things are happening on a different level there. If we look at two recent examples of piece of news that we saw, first one on the right was content published by GFI, the Good Food Institute, looking at the top 20 patents in the cultivated meat cellular agriculture ecosystem in the world, and 8 of these top patent applicants were Chinese organizations, and in many cases universities. So there is a will, a public will, which is supportive of of this industry, and also large companies which are entering the space there. So the innovation ecosystem is structured differently, and maybe just looking at it through the lenses of the startup funding is not the right way to look at the Chinese innovation ecosystem. And also on the left, what you have is an illustration of what we call the delivery war in China. So what we observed in North America, South America, and pretty much all over Europe 4 or 5 years ago, with a lot of delivery players competing against themselves, happened in China. But we have a new or a second delivery war with tech players, which were not in food delivery, entering the space. And that's very interesting in many ways, and could somehow inspire also tech players in Europe, in the US, and in other continents to enter this space. So definitely, we are taking more and more interest in what's happening in China. Second ecosystem we wanted to highlight just because we base there is the European one. So we went from not that much in Europe. Pre-COVID, the European ecosystem was not super relevant. It was mostly delivery startups. It, it boomed a lot during and post-COVID. The decrease was not so strong in 22, 23, 24. But then, at least for the first half of the year and for Q3, the decrease is pretty strong in Europe. So, but again, we have a very contrasted situation with funding being very much down, but on the other end of the spectrum, we see a lot of European-based large companies creating partnerships with startups from Europe and other places, but mostly from Europe, and venturing in increasingly relevant partnerships, commercialization deals, etc. So something is happening in Europe, but not again on the startup side. And also on another layer, we see a lot of involvement from the EU commissions on the food tech, biotech, food biotech ecosystem with kind of a lot of money, recent 350 million euro plan, etc. So there is something happening specifically in Europe, even if it really very much doesn't show in the data. And finally, other geographies that we are taking an interest into. These are mostly points of interest, not things that we can really spot on data. Most like, okay, the areas where we see things happening. First, Canada, a lot of deals recently, early stage deals in alternative proteins, etc. So very interesting. Japan, mostly for the involvement of Japanese agri-food companies, which are creating partnerships, commercialization deals with startups from all over the world. So very interesting to look at. Australia plus New Zealand startups, and notably in methane reduction in agri-tech, so very interesting space. And the Gulf region with new mega deals in delivery, and also the government involvement in leveraging the potential of alternative proteins locally. And still Israel, even if funding is not so good right now for obvious reasons, the ecosystem startup remains extremely strong there, much more than in many places in Europe or in the US. As I said many times, one of the most important thing in to measure the health of an ecosystem is exits, or basically startup being acquired or exiting through an IPO, entering to the stock market. If you look at this list of the most relevant exits of the past 18 months, what do we see? We see brand, robots, brand, robots, brand. That's basically it. Brands and agricultural robots. So on the bright side, that means that there is a space for brands, that companies are acquiring a lot of brands, notably in the healthy aging or healthy benefit space, like Poppy, Epogy, Siete Foods, etc., etc. So definitely a space to look at more and more carefully. And on the other side, that means that for the whole other parts, a whole ecosystem, basically it means that there is no exit, no acquisitions, which is very, very bad right now, because we need to have liquidity events for investors to return money to their own investors and then to reinvest back into the startup ecosystem. So we have an issue there. And that translates very much in what we observe in terms of funding. If you look at this graph, we have splitted and sorted funding depending on the maturity of the startups getting funded. And what you can see, and which is quite visible, is that funding is decreasing, as we saw in the other graphs, but actually it's much more decreasing in Series A and seed, meaning that long-term emerging startups are not getting funded and are less and less getting funded. So meaning that there is less startups that will be in any potential situation to create disruptions in the medium and long term. So we have a deep crisis of funding in this ecosystem, which somehow needs to find solutions. As I said, before jumping into some insights of where we could go next, the main conclusions of the reports were that we had an increase in 2024 funding, but we are observing a strong decrease for the first half and Q3 of 2025. And that somehow, even in this complicated ecosystem, we add a large volume of exits in the ecosystem, which is quite noticeable. And the best example is definitely Poppy, the prebiotic brand of beverage brand, which was acquired by PepsiCo for 1.9 billion, which is in itself illustrating of all the trends that we observe in the ecosystem right now. Before jumping, as I said, to the next part about what we observe and what could happen next, two ways in which the DigitalFoodlab could help and support you in your activities, notably to follow what's happening in the ecosystem. We do a lot of workshops and presentation, obviously 100% tailor-made, so to inspire broadly teams or boards about what's happening in the agri-FoodTech ecosystem and focused in your area. Recent topics included a presentation on coffee, or focused on what was happening on funding. So again, definitely what's happening to your ecosystem. A second way that we can help you navigate this overcrowding of information, this overflow of information related to innovation. We create for our clients what we call our FoodTech Watch. So the idea is that we start by discussing what is relevant to you. So what are you interested about? Why are you interested in this kind of information? And each month we deliver to you a monthly watch, a newsletter with all the pieces of news that are the things that you should know, summarized based on what is relevant to you, with comments, putting things in to highlight when a startup says, oh, next year I will deliver my product to the market, but that has been something that the startup has been saying for 2, 3 years now. It's always interesting to put things into context and to see if it makes sense for you. And obviously, if this kind of projects, presentations, and watch could make sense to you, let us know. Send us an email. We'd love to have a discussion with you. Now let's jump to the second part, which is about what we are seeing about the potential of this ecosystem and notably explanation about the decrease. As you can see, decrease is really strong, minus 80% compared 2021 and where we are now. But actually, what I often hear is that it's a uniquely agri-food situation. That's very much not the case. As you can see on this graph, if you take tech and you remove AI, you have exactly the same pattern, minus 77%. So the same thing is happening in all tech or all tech-related topics except artificial intelligence. So it's not an agri-food tech trend or downward trend. So in many ways, what we often say is that comparing yourself is a way to reassure yourself, and that's the first point that I wanted to stress out. We are just in a cyclical ecosystem, funding ecosystem. Things go up, things go down. We are just in down moment. It means that it's complicated. Many companies are failing and going bankrupt. VCs are not delivering good results, etc. But if we still believe in the underlying trends and reasons behind the ecosystem, things should go up in a matter of time. Then, let's be honest, there are structural problems related to food. Inside food, we have three issues that we need to solve collectively. The first one is about exits. Why don't we see more exits beyond brands and food robots? So the main reason that we observe is that many of the startups lack a viable path to profitability. So they are too early stage to being acquired. But even there, I think something has been to be rethinked inside large agri-food companies about their acquisition strategy, notably related to technologies. Then we have a funding challenge for biotechnology startups. We can't finance in the same way a startup which is doing a software as a service solution, someone which is doing a brand. These can be financed in the same way, but we can find the same way someone which is doing cellular agriculture, plant cell culture, or any kind of biotech technology. The time frame is not the same. Maybe we need an access to public markets, but more public investment. But there is an issue and a very strong one there. And finally, there is the scale up and the regulation challenge. It's not so much a challenge right now, but it will become one in the coming years. Many technologies are becoming viable. So now we need to scale them up to build large scale facilities, and we need regulation to be a bit more willing to accept them. And we don't have a lot of good answers for that right now on either point. So, as I said, we remain optimistic. We're still there. We still see a large amount of optimism in the ecosystem. First, even if funding won't bounce back by the end of this year, or probably won't bounce back by the end of this year, we still feel that we are in a downward cycle and that they will bounce back and things will get better in the short term. Some categories are still doing well: healthy aging, agriculture, sustainability, etc. So many areas which are doing well. And as illustrated by these screenshots, there are so many corporate involvements, partnerships, commercialization deals happening right now in Europe, in Asia, in North America. So it somehow compensates for the state of the ecosystem right now. And as I said, very for us, our main source of optimism is just to look at this curve, which we release every year about all the trends that we observe in the ecosystem. And if there is one thing to look at, it's the number of trends on the left part of the curve. So many things which are in some way going hype, so moving forward, creating excitement. So it's definitely not a sign of an ecosystem which has run its course and at the end of its life. So what should you look at in the next months to know if things will get better? Here are the three items that are on our radar. Uh, First, as I mentioned again and again, there are many partnerships happening. They have been announced. They look much more meaningful than the ones or the few ones that we saw a few years back, but now they have to materialize. So to transform from announcements, news articles into products, partnerships, commercialization deals with real money at the end of it. So that's a key point that we'll be looking at because if we start to see a cycle of real materialization of these deals, it will translate in more funding and more innovation, etc. So in a virtual cycle. Uh, Announcements around the hypes that I mentioned, uh, everything related to healthy aging, notably sugar alternative, new ingredients, sustainability for agriculture, bioinputs, methane reduction, topics around what we call limited supplied resources, so egg alternatives, cocoa alternative, coffee alternatives. These are the hype topics of the moment. If they are able to go from hype to meaningful products, ingredients entering the market, services, these will be transformative for the ecosystem, showing that we can go from hype to concrete results. And finally, exits, even if it's not the point where I'm the most optimistic about. Right now, we need any kind of exit, even if this is about startups being sold at much lower than expected valuations. We need exits with corporates acquiring startups. And I'm not mentioning startups acquiring startup. That doesn't count really as an exit. So we need to see more of those. So these were the three signs that we have on our radar. Now, if you'd be interested to go deeper and go deeper than the information that I shared there, as I said in the beginning, we do a lot of ecosystem deep dives and reports, tailor-made reports. So if you have any kind of questions, which can be on technology like solid state fermentation, which can be on an ecosystem, sugar alternatives, or on universities that are the most relevant to leverage innovation on any given topic. These are areas that we can work on with you. And we also work on innovation strategy, helping you to determine your own innovation curve, what you should put on your radar, and then determine what is priority, what is relevant, and from there do the deep dive and helping you to structure a strategy about what you should do in the short, medium, and long term right now to prepare for your future as a company. Uh, Thank you for your time, and I don't know if there were any questions, but maybe Jeremy, you can share them.
Yes, thank you, Matthieu. Thank you very much for this presentation. Yes, so if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or in the Q&A tool. And we have some first questions here. So with the current investment crisis, if you are a startup that is looking to raise money in the following months, what should you do? Should you focus on partnerships, maybe just on slowing down and waiting? I don't know. Do you have some advice for startup in this situation?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I have any definitive advice on this very complicated timeline, but indeed, extending your runway is a must. But right now, having real corporate involvement is indeed required, and by that we don't mean the traditional slide with 200 logos of the startup that you've spotted as potential people and or potential partners with whom you may have spoke at an event. We mean about real involvement going beyond the NDA. So like, okay, doing real partnerships.
Thank you. We have questions about healthy aging. So today, a lot of companies and in food tech in general, we are talking a lot about healthy aging. Is this is it the biggest topic in the future, or is it the future of food tech, in your opinion?
I don't know if it's the future of food tech, but it's definitely a space that has created a lot of traction, notably due to GLP-1, so these anti-weight, anti-diabetics drugs in the US and now in Europe, China, and pretty much everywhere. So the idea that the future of food is health is getting a lot of traction. Now it's so the image is really blurry because we don't know really well where we're going. And in some ways, I'm a bit worried that we are just rebranding something that we were calling personalization 5 to 10 years ago, and which never delivered any kind of result. And now we're calling it healthy aging. But when we talk to companies, they don't have a very clear view of what that means and what they want to do with it. So that's probably the future of a large part of the ecosystem, but it's very unclear now. It's going in many directions. One which is ingredients, so sugar alternatives, lactoferrin kind of stuff, and the other one is about services. My deep feeling is that if you want as a company to do anything related to healthy aging, you can't just put a better ingredient or an ingredient better for you in a food product. That's not enough. You need to have a complete strategy and notably to work with the consumer as on its whole food journey with services. And we don't see a lot of companies going in that direction.
Thank you. Um, Question about China. So you said that if we look at data, China's role seems a bit underestimated in food tech. Um, can you explain us deeper about that? I have more question about state investments, politics, etc., behind recent move in China.
Yeah. Um, Investment or startup funding in China is, to put it mildly, it's a mess. It's so complicated. I wouldn't pretend to understand really what's happening in terms of innovation funding because it's so complicated. It's like the local governments funding and big companies funding. It's pretty much mandatory for that banks fund startups. It's super complicated. So it's not something that it's very different from what we see on the West. But what we see is that many parts of what we consider the main trends of the agri-food tech ecosystem are now being supported by public players. And by that, we mean the latest reports from the Communist Party saying, okay, we need to go in this direction. Cellular agriculture was mentioned a few years ago. It's even more supported by the state ecosystem. So we know that when the government will decide to go in that direction, they could push very much in that direction. And in some ways, we fear that we could have something which is like what we are currently experimenting with clean energy and solar panels. So all the technology having been developed, especially in that case in the US and Germany, and being abandoned because it was too expensive, etc., and changing political conditions, and then being used and leveraged and scaled by China. And that's what we feel that we are starting to experiment in with some ingredients around precision fermentation, where we are starting to see Chinese companies entering the market with much lower costs, etc. So we are wondering if it's unfortunately what not the future of many of the technologies that we're seeing being developed in the West, and then due to political factors, scale inabilities being scaled in China.
Yeah, thank you. And after China, a question about the United States. Do you have any thoughts about MAHA, so Make American Healthier Again movement, and if it could help or not accelerate startup funding?
Yeah, if I was saying that investments in China is a bit of a mess, the regulatory landscape in the US is now a bit more than that. Yeah, basically, MAHA or Make America Healthy Again is going in very different directions, but some of them are good, some of them I don't know if they are good, but at least they're there, and they create conditions for for innovation, which is good in some way, but they also create a lot of uncertainties around regulation. So we still don't know what will be authorized in the US in the next couple of years. So uncertainties are not positive. What we often say is that investors are little afraid animals that like certainties. So that's not super good. What it creates, at least positive in terms of positive for the innovation ecosystem, is that the requirement to create cleaner labels, cleaner ingredient list is having a positive impact in some cases, because food companies have to rethink their recipes, and so now is the time to maybe integrate new, more efficient ingredients. But to say that it will have positive or negative impact on the ecosystem would require to have an understanding of what is clearly the direction of MAHA.
Mhm. I understand. Thank you. Question about partnerships. So you mentioned partnerships that as a way to move on FoodTech, a way for startup to grow, etc. So what are how, how can you define a good partnership versus a bad partnerships? Mostly a bad, I mean a PR only partnership. So what are the characteristics of a good partnership between a corporation and a startup?
At the end of the day, good partnership, in the sense that we're talking about, is one that will help to land a deal, real deal, which is about commercialization or acquiring products or just an acquisition. So what we see now is that indeed we've moved from a place a few years ago where partnerships, even when they were announced, they were, we will work together to explore X, Y, Z. When there was this sentence, we are exploring together, it was meaning that we won't do anything. It was nice. It was the business development team or open innovation team doing something with the startup, not the R&D, not the procurement team, etc. So we went from that to we are working in ways to use the ingredient in our products. And what I find the most relevant ones are, for example, Solar Foods announced partnerships with Ajinomoto, with Father, and with other companies, where they say, okay, these companies are acquiring X amount of our products. These companies are testing, launching a product under their brand in this or that market. So where you have a concrete materialization again of the partnership, where you can measure, okay, something is really happening.
Mm. Thank you. We have several questions about different categories of food tech, but mostly about supply chain in general, AI in supply chain, and also I include packaging in the supply chain area. What do we observe in this sector? What innovation will drive this category in the future, in your opinion?
Packaging ecosystem is very much an ecosystem where we would like to see more activity, but we don't hear a lot. Right now, it's pretty much limited to startups doing kind of bio coating for fresh fruit and vegetables. So you put a spray which will limit oxidation. That's the extent of the packaging ecosystem, plus some startups doing real packaging, but that's very much limited due to quite obvious problems in food packaging. Is a cost, is not an added value, and we need scale that is not really reachable for startups. So, innovation won't probably come from food for packaging. But on the other part of the ecosystem, we see a lot of traction for the use of AI in the management of the whole company or the facility. So there we see meaningful deals, very interesting place where to improve processes, to reduce waste, etc. Some things that it's very interesting because that's something that we saw a few years ago in the food service area, creating the operating system of the restaurant, etc., etc. We are starting to see the same thing happening at the factory or company level in around the supply chain. So that's probably where we see the most relevant innovation.
Thank you. And to conclude, a last question on the topic. I know you love chocolate. So for you, what is the future of chocolate, especially alternative chocolate?
That's a million-dollar question. What's the future of chocolate? But at least 3 points. First, the crisis of cocoa production is here to stay because demand exceeds supply by quite a large amount, and it will be very complicated to extend supply for a lot of geopolitical reasons. And yeah, in many ways, it's related to other topics, notably to gold, because gold prices are rising, and these are regions that are also gold producing. So it's let's say in many ways more profitable to somehow to destroy the land and to scrap gold out of it than to grow cocoa. So the issue is there to stay. Point number one. Point number two, there are innovation beyond cocoa alternatives, which are new crops, new ways of cultivating, etc. Recently, Nestle announced some stuff around that. So agro innovation is a space to look at. Then, if we look at cocoa alternatives, in the short term, we have experimented with what we call plant-based alternatives or alternatives based on fermentation, in most cases, solid state or liquid state fermentation. These products are getting super good. Just tasted a couple of products last week, which were very much amazing. So that's good. They have very good arguments for how to say to about because you upcycle ingredients, so they have sustainability ingredients which are amazing. And then long term, plant cell culture is it's amazing. So it could be the entryway of biotech food or biofoods into our daily diet. So yeah, but that's definitely on top of our radar.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Matthieu, for all your answers. So I think we're done for today. Thank you all for attending this webinar. I remind you that the report on global investment is available for free on our website, and you can subscribe to our newsletter also for free, so do not hesitate. Well, thank you all,
Thanks.
and see you.
See you
Bye.
soon. Thanks. Bye.